Today's film features a femme fatale focused on framing friends and finishing her future fiancés through finesse and fenestration. Hello, I'm Professor Movie-Maestro, your instructor and guide to time and entertainment. Today we are discussing 1948's Blonde Ice. Also, yes, Timmy, I see you raising your hand in the back of class. No, Blonde Ice is not Vanilla Ice's original stage name. At least, I don't think so. No! Do not stand on your desk and try to inspire the class to chant for us to watch Vanilla Ice's feature film Cool as Ice instead of watching what you consider a film for the olds. I'm your professor, and I design the curriculum. You will study what I present to you. Now then, students, welcome to class. Shut up, sit down, get ready to learn.
Movie-Maestro.
Blonde Ice, directed by Jack Bernard and written by Kenneth Gamet, is a 1948 noir film based on the novel Once Too Often by Whitman Chambers. The film was produced by Martin Mooney and distributed through Film Classics, a short-lived company that re-released films often produced by MGM Talent, but later produced original low-budget independent fare. Blonde Ice features Leslie Brooks in the role of Claire Cummings, a soon-to-be wed woman shown to have had no problem using men and their attraction to her to attain what she desires. Robert Page plays Les Burns, Claire's co-worker at the newspaper and former/current lover. Blonde Ice is also James Griffith's debut film, as he plays Al Herrick, a jilted admirer of Claire and additional writer at Claire's former newspaper. Griffith would go on to have a long and storied career, being featured in 230 projects, including the original Dragnet film, Night of the Hunter, and The Amazing Transparent Man. Film opens on the shortest wedding ceremony I have ever seen. Claire walks down a flight of stairs, the couple exchange vows, she immediately walks back to the staircase, tosses the bouquet, and the newlyweds begin greeting guests. All of this takes place in under 2 minutes and plays out seemingly in real time. Now, if only graduation and commencement speeches were that short and not 4 hours long. We get a fun exchange between Les and Al, two newspaper writers at Claire's former job, visually showing us that Claire has previously played both of these men through the gift of cigarette cases with the same message written inside by Claire. They both still harbor desire for Claire, yet understand the current situation. Les dismisses himself during the wedding, and Claire joins him later on the terrace. She reaffirms her love for Les and kisses him. Claire's new husband sees this through the window, but she assures him that it was a friendly departing kiss.
It was nothing? Just a friendly goodbye kiss. Why, he's like a brother.
Weird. On Claire and Carl Hanneman's honeymoon, we are treated to a short scene at the racetrack, where we discover Claire is money-obsessed and wins big by betting a small fortune on the race. Carl discovers this and explains his relationship to his hard-earned money. This brief exchange quickly establishes Claire's flippancy at others' work, as she feels entitled to others' fortune and writes to Les about Carl's stinginess. When Carl discovers her letter to Les admitting she is only using her new husband for his money, Carl decides to leave and file for divorce. Claire's true intentions are not really a secret or surprise to the audience. After Carl leaves the honeymoon suite, she immediately orders sleeping pills in the middle of the day. This is followed by Claire receiving a newspaper where she learns that a pilot has just been released from jail after certain criminal charges were dropped. Claire meets with the pilot the same night, and while this is certainly a piece of fiction, the expediency and quick pacing of the first act is very noticeable. The film doesn't want to get too bogged down by reality because it seeks getting to the meat of the story. I would have liked to have seen Claire and Carl's relationship evolve a little more, but it isn't needed and would have been wasted space in the economical screenplay of the time. Claire meets with pilot Blackie Talon, played by Russ Vincent. It's funny, the one man Claire doesn't attempt to entice by her wiles in the course of the film is played by actress Leslie Brooks' eventual real-life husband, Russ Vincent. The duo would marry 2 years after the film's release and stayed married for the remainder of Mr. Vincent's life, a full 51 years later. After acting, Russ Vincent went into real estate in Hollywood, and Leslie Brooks would only act in 3 more projects. 2 released in 1948, the same year as Blonde Ice, but she did not star in these. The final project was a bit part in How's Your Love Life in 1971. It's a shame, as Miss Brooks is one of the best parts of this film, and I believe she could have been a prominent player in other noir films or dramatic roles. I must mention that it is another stretch of the imagination that Blackie is back to work the very same night as his criminal charges were dismissed. What follows is Claire bribing Blackie with her winnings from the race for a round trip to San Francisco, Carl Hanneman's home, to which he has returned following Claire's betrayal. I'd like to point out that there is something unusual that stood out in my brain when watching this scene. Do you spot it? At first, I thought it was a clear day for night shot. Also, it's odd because it breaks the 180-degree rule, but I realize that it's supposed to be her leaving to San Francisco and returning back to the honeymoon hotel in LA. However, there's one more thing that is a cheap production trick. If you spot it before I explain, pause the video and leave a comment below. Okay, now look close. Now flip. See, it's either the same shot flipped, or they had the plane circle back around and then fly in front of the same exact clouds. This confirms my day for night theory, is how could one fly in front of the same exact cloud shape hours later? Now class, this production trick is not important to the overall story, but I want to share how sometimes your brain may perceive something before you can process the information. Not only is this an interesting production factoid, but I highly encourage each of you, if interested in film production, to watch films not only through the lens of story, but also as if you were filmmakers yourself. You see, the only way to better yourself as a writer or filmmaker is to place yourself in the very shoes of that role when watching films. Claire orders breakfast at the hotel, firmly establishing her alibi, then makes a call to Les and demands he buy her a plane ticket to return to San Francisco that night. She also insists that he pick her up from the airport. This is all quite clever and establishes Claire as scheming and very intelligent. She barely pauses as she enacts each stage of establishing her cover story. The duo return to Hanneman's estate, Claire's inherited new home through marriage, where Les notices a figure slumped in a chair in the living room. He walks over to discover Carl Hanneman dead. Claire's final step to ensure her alibi is airtight and ensure she inherits Hanneman's estate as his grieving widow. That's enough of the story to hopefully entice you to watch the film in its entirety. The film then leads into a game of cat and mouse with police captain Bill Murdoch. Les is soon considered the prime suspect in Hanneman's murder. He wears some stylish ties. Is that a cartoon dog or cow? Interesting choice by the wardrobe department, as it doesn't really seem in Les's character, and he doesn't wear anything like it throughout the entirety of the movie. My theory? Perhaps Robert Page, the actor that played Les Burns, had a kid that gifted him the tie, and he asked to wear it on screen for them. Or maybe the wardrobe department were completely hammered that day. Why does Les wear this tie? I must know! As mentioned before, Al Herrick is a fellow writer at the same newspaper as Les, and was formerly spurned by Claire. He quickly situates himself as the writer to cover Hanneman's murder and clashes with Les at any available chance. James Griffith does a wonderful job in this role. From choices made in hair and makeup to wardrobe, Al's entire look and demeanor tells us that he is the type of man to weasel himself into any place to get the angle and story he wants. Honestly, Al is a great character. Griffith is a true acting standout in this film next to Miss Brooks. Griffith sells the sliminess of Al's character and his boiling disdain for Claire and subsequently her preferred lover, Les. Before wrapping up my review, I want to say that this film has as subtle of a title drop as classic films such as David Ayer's Suicide Squad.
What, we some kind of Suicide Squad?
And Escape Room, Tournament of Champions.
So what is this? Like a tournament of champions?
I once said I couldn't figure you out. I can now. You're cold, like ice. Blonde ice.
Finally, in my Invisible Man review, I touched upon the wants and needs of a protagonist. This film is unusual, as we are led to believe that Claire is our protagonist. The film's language seems to put her in the middle of the action, and she's the driving force for the narrative. However, I don't believe it is that simple. It may seem like Claire is our protagonist, but I would argue that the true protagonist is actually Les. I found myself asking, what is Claire's need during the end of the second act? As if to poetically answer my question, a psychoanalyst joins Claire's new target, attorney Stanley Mason, at a dinner with Claire. The venomous blonde happily asks to be examined by the psychologist. Mason doesn't believe in the study, but Dr. Kippinger indulges her request and explains she seeks money, power, and status. However, she doesn't necessarily have a reason for those drives. His analysis almost makes Claire similar to Michael Myers, a machine focused on achieving primal goals without reason. She will simply hunt and use anyone to achieve her mission of achieving these things. On the other hand, Les wants Claire, but the audience can clearly see that he needs to move on from her. Les begins to realize this after going on a drinking binge that results in temporary clarity. However, he almost falls back into her trap when Claire's new fiancé, Mason, barges into the room as she is attempting to wiggle her way into the arms of Les. Les leaves, and we hope he decides to fully move on from Claire. It is at this moment that we should pause. We have two choices. If we were to consider Claire as the protagonist, there's an interesting moment at the end of the film when she declares that she never loved Al, Carl, or Mason. She then realizes that despite her lack of attachment, she felt she needed to keep Les around, confessing that maybe she actually loved him. While not described or shown, we can infer that Claire simply needed a change from pursuing her surface-level desires and should have chosen love with Les. However, because she is cold and insanely focused on her goals, she frames Les with ease, first setting him up to be just enough of a patsy to throw suspicion off of her during the investigation of Hanneman's death, but then later she easily leaves a letter opener in the floor of Les's apartment for him to pick up and apply his fingerprints to incriminate him in another crime. She might have loved Les, but her desire for material things was more powerful than any humanity hiding deep within her. In contrast, let me introduce another aspect of screenwriting, the three-act dramatic narrative. This simple tool for screenwriting simply explains that if we begin at a high point, or relative good place in Act 1, the character must struggle and be forced low in Act 2, culminating in a positive end to Act 3. Comedy, romance, and action films use this format all of the time. Think about a rom-com. The duo meet, happy. Break up, sad. Get back together, happy. Now, these rules can be broken if you know the craft well enough, but we are trained to respond to these types of narratives as they are typically constructed and will often reject stories that try to go against this format. Inversely, if the protagonist starts in a low point, the second act will see things getting better before the third act sees them crashing to another low. This is often seen in biopics or crime films. For instance, a poor farmer is struggling to keep his farm afloat. Then he decides to sell his beets to countries that have banned beets. With his newfound riches, he buys up other beet farms and corners the market, thus making him the beet kingpin. However, in the third act, he forgot to pay his taxes, and the man arrests him and takes his farm, bringing him back to a low. If we apply this format to Blonde Ice, it is Les's story that matches up best to this format. Les starts relatively high when Claire returns from her honeymoon to spend time with him. This is still within Act 1. When Les finds Carl and subsequently is considered the prime suspect, this is bringing him lower. However, he hits his true low when he learns that Claire is engaged to Senator Mason. She then frames him for another murder and brings him to his lowest low. However, he achieves a victory in the finale and rids himself of Claire's presence in his life, the greatest high he could achieve within the confines of this narrative. It is my opinion that via the tools of screenwriting and dramatic structure, Les is the true protagonist of Blonde Ice. This makes Claire his antagonist and could create a very interesting foundation if I was to assign homework for this film. However, rest assured, I will not this week. But I wouldn't mind assigning Timmy a 30-page essay. Could someone please tell Timmy to wake up? Overall, this was an enjoyable enough romp. It wasn't the most engrossing affair, but the film has languished in relative anonymity for many years. The film was lost until 2003 and has since been restored. The particular version I screened was the most recent release on Blu-ray by Classic Flicks. I'm not affiliated with Classic Flicks, but I wanted to touch on the quality of the film's restoration, While the sound is dense at times, I had no trouble following along with the 75-year-old film's narrative. The picture was very clean, and you wouldn't guess that it was from a limited selection of original elements. I hope the good folks at Classic Flicks continue to restore and release a plethora of films previously thought lost, and I hope these films find appreciation from new audiences. Blonde Ice might have been a simple Poverty Row noir film, but it stands out in a minor way due to how ruthless the titular femme fatale is. In typical noir films, the focus is on a singular protagonist being pulled into a web of deceit and violence prompted by the arrival of a seductive woman with ulterior motives. However, in Blonde Ice, multiple men become ensnared in Claire's trap, and it is only through working together that they can bring her murderous and arresting reign to an end. Claire Cummings is a formidable femme fatale, but the screenplay and direction left little nuance for Leslie Brooks to elevate through her performance. Now class, since Timmy is asleep at his desk, who has access to fake blood? Yeah, like the stuff you use in theater plays. I want you to cover his hands in it, and I will lie down here on the ground in front of my desk motionless. Pour some around my head. When he wakes up and sees the scene in front of him, he might be so petrified that he drops this class once and for all. Then none of us will have to deal with Timmy's comments again. Think about how it could improve the curve on which your grades are scored. Is that a yes? Yes! Oh, never mind. He's awake. Yes, Timmy. Class is over. All right, class, gather your books. I'll see you all again soon. Good night, everybody. Grace and peace to you all. Class dismissed.